This is the first time Russian drones have been shot down over NATO territory, and therefore all our allies are taking the situation very seriously.
That was Prime Minister Donald Tusk of Poland just hours ago talking about what happened over Polish territory overnight. And there were drones come into Poland that were shot down by a combination of actually Polish and other NATO assets. This could mark a very important turning point in the war. The thing that I have been worried about from this war almost from the very beginning is the risk of escalation, that the war would advance beyond the borders of Ukraine. I was very worried about it in the opening rounds of the war, especially when the U.S. and the European Union and NATO all went all in to help Ukraine. I was really concerned about that, as we would allow different kinds of weapon systems and escalate the involvement. I was worried about it. Then things kind of settled in for a while, and it looked like, okay, this is kind of settling into just within the boundaries of the war. But I've always been worried that the longer the war goes, the longer you have the opportunity for error, for miscalculation, or just outright accident. You just never know what may happen. And then when people start acting and reacting to the action, you have the possibility for mistakes, for errors in judgment, and things could spin out of hand. This issue here is the first time that there's actually been military action by the NATO alliance on alliance territory regarding any kind of at least alleged Russian activity. Now, let's just take a look at this. Now, this is all literally hours old. This is all hours old, so we don't have a full picture of what's going on here. You have lots of accusations, counter accusations, denials, etc. So we're trying to figure out what's going on, trying to look at the evidence here. So we don't, obviously the West is saying that this was a Russian incursion or Russian provocation. But Russia is saying, we don't, we're not sure about this. They're not giving a full-throated denial. They have said, I think that the term they used is, we did not have any planned attacks into Poland. And they're saying, hey, let's look at the evidence here. But the Russian side, I'm sorry, the Polish side, and certainly the Ukraine and Western side, are all saying, oh yeah, it was definitely a Russian. They came in. So far, there hasn't been a pretty direct, strong accusation that this was an intentional provocation to try to draw the Western allies into the war, etc. So even they're kind of saying, well, let's just talk about this. So good so far. That's what we need to do. But we can't exclude the possibility that this could also have been what's commonly referred to as a false flag. Now, we're going to get into the details of what people said, and we're going to show you right now. I don't know. I don't have evidence. I'll just tell you that at the top. I don't know where this stuff came from. I don't know who launched that. I don't know what their intentions were. But we are starting to get some information and evidence that raise questions. I'll put it that way, and we're definitely going to do that. First of all, let's start in Poland, since that's where all this took place. I just showed you a soundbite of the Polish Prime Minister Tusk a minute ago. Here is a little bit more about what he claims happened overnight.
Naruszenia przestrzeni powietrznej, polskiej przestrzeni powietrznej przez dużą liczbę rosyjskich dronów. Te drony, które stanowiły bezpośrednie zagrożenie, zostały zestrzelone. Mamy do czynienia najprawdopodobniej z prowokacją na dużą skalę, ale równocześnie jesteśmy w konsultacjach z naszymi sojusznikami. Jestem w stałym kontakcie z sekretarzem generalnym NATO, tak aby przez najbliższych kilka godzin, dni i w dalszej przyszłości równie skutecznie jak dzisiaj w nocy działać w przypadku tego typu zagrożenia.
I will say, just based on body language, Tusk does not exactly project confidence and certainty. I mean, you can see he was fidgeting with his fingers the whole time. His face, his demeanor just really shows a lot of uncertainty, and that's not really a good look if you're trying to project power. And we have the alliance behind us. Mark Rutte is a little bit better at that, because he's, I think if Zelenskyy was an actual actor, I think Mark Rutte was a practical actor. He's really good at just saying it with convincing words, whatever he wants you to believe. You'll see him in a minute. But aside from just the optics of this, what's been reported is a little bit contradictory, because some people say that there were 19. I think that's the number that the polls use. They say there were 19 air vehicles of various types that were sent into the country. I think you're going to see Ursula von der Leyen say there were 10. Some others said that there was about a dozen. So we don't really know what's happened so far. And in terms of what actually came in, both Tusk as well as Sikorsky and Ursula von der Leyen, they have expressly said there were Shahed drones, which of course come from Russia. So far, we haven't seen any evidence of any of them. They say that if there was 19 and that they shot them down so far, well, I've only personally seen one photograph of a downed vehicle, which appeared to be an unarmed, what they call decoy. Oftentimes when Russia comes in, yeah, that's the one right there. That's the only thing that I've seen so far, and that's actually from Russian media. I haven't seen anything from the Western media so far, and I looked through both the Washington Post and the New York Times and some of the European outlets before we came on the air, and so far all I've heard is talk about these things and that they're examining the wreckage, etc. But that's the only thing that I've seen so far. And if you're not clear what a decoy is, very oftentimes, in fact, every time that I'm aware of, when Russia has one of these large-scale attacks into Ukrainian airspace, they have a combination of these Garand 2s, which is the latest iteration of the drone that they originally got from Iran, which is a lot of upgrades, better engine, faster, higher payload, etc. They also include a significant number. I've been told by some sources up to 40% of decoy drones, which is what they would use to spoof the defensive positions of the Ukraine side, because they don't know if it's a Garand 2 or if it's a decoy just by the signature of it coming in. So they have to use an air defense missile. These things can cost as little as $3,000 to $5,000, $7,000, and one source tells me, as opposed to about the $20,000 for the Garand. So for the Russians, it's like, yeah, this, you can have it's like $100,000 air defense missile can take out a decoy drone that wasn't going to do anything anyway, except just, land into a building with no explosive, etc. They don't know, so you have to attack them all. That's what a decoy drone is intended to do. Just basically, it's a cost-effective way to suck down air defense interceptor missiles from the Russians' perspective against the Ukraine side here. Let's take Tusk mentioned in there that he had already been talking with Secretary General. So let's take a look at what he had to say.
Several allies were involved alongside Poland. This included Polish F-16s, Dutch F-35s, Italian AWACS, NATO multi-role tanker transport, and German Patriots. This only reinforces the importance of NATO and the path to which allies agreed at our summit in The Hague earlier this year. We need to invest more in our defense, ramp up defense production, so we have what we need to deter and defend. And we need to continue to support Ukraine, whose security is interlinked with our own.
Now, he mentions a number of countries. I think it was Poland, the Netherlands, Spain, I think it was. All these different aircraft were in the air, tankers were in the air, etc. So this is either, let me see if I can use my words correctly. This was either evidence that NATO is very, very nimble and on the fly can really ramp up and take care of any kind of incursion into it, than to have this multinational response on the dime. Or it could imply that maybe they had some sort of advanced knowledge. Either could be true. And again, what I'm trying to convey is here, we don't really know what happened yet. We just know what many sides are claiming. But this is either a good news story for NATO, that even with no advance warning at all, as soon as these drones hit the Polish airspace, they were able to scramble all of these assets to get into the air, the fighter pilots from more than one country, the refueling tankers and all that kind of stuff to take care of this issue here, because there wasn't a lot of notice, because these Shaheds are flying all the time anyway. They routinely fly near the Polish border. So for these to have veered into the country and then to spawn that is either a really good example that they can respond quickly with no notice, or that there was some advance notice of it. We'll more on that in a second as well. But the other thing there about what Mark Rutte says is that whether intended or not, he sure didn't waste any time to exploit the opportunity to raise back the issue that says we need to rearm and we need to continue on because this threat from Russia is a persistent one. Ukraine security is a Western European security. And we all have to band together on this to recognize this threat from Russia. So just kind of reinforce and revitalize public opinion that we have to fight against Russia. We have to be ready to fight. I've shown you in the last couple of months, Mark Rutte just emphatically saying we have to be ready to fight in, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. We're definitely we have to be ready to fight Russia, et cetera. So he's really driving home with that. He also said there will be no normalization with Russia, even after the war is over. No, he said those days are done. So everything he can to prevent any kind of cessation of the hostilities, any kind of lowering of the temperature that would actually prevent war or make it much less likely. In fact, he's doing everything to make sure that it stays on the front burner. Even after the war is over, he wants to continue to rearm, etc. Now, I get it. NATO is a military alliance. It's not a political alliance. And the job of the Secretary General is to prepare for war. I mean, the classic thing, if you want peace, prepare for war. Peace through strength and all that. Yeah, I get that. There's a lot of validity to those things. But there's also, you have to have some wisdom in there. And when your only recourse, the only way your brain is even wired, and the only thing that can ever come out of your mouth is war, 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 fight, 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 then that's not healthy. That's not effective even, because if the only tools in your tool chest are either a war or a bunch of war or threats of attack, etc., and continuing to demonize your opponent, not even talking about the possibility of reconciliation or let's sit down and talk about it. Where do we have any common ground? How can we get this conflict off? Those aren't even in the toolkit. That's where we're at here as an alliance. Now, if you can say, sure, Mark Rutte, he's the NATO Secretary General, then you would think, okay, well, the political side at the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, probably she's the one who's talking more broadly than just military.
Just today, we have seen a reckless and unprecedented violation of Poland and Europe's airspace by more than 10 Russian Shahid drones. Europe stands in full solidarity with Poland.
Okay, well, all right, forget it. Sorry. I guess there is unanimity in the political and the military arms of Europe, and the only language any of them know is war. And of course, she also had this opportunity here. This was the State of the Union address for the European Union. This was already planned and really good timing, right? As soon as that comes in, you use that opportunity to really reinforce that we have to uparm and rearm Europe, and we need more money, we need more weapons for Ukraine, etc. So not wasting any opportunities, again, planned or unplanned, they sure exploited that opportunity to talk more about war funding for Ukraine and therefore for the European Union as well. Also, who didn't waste any time, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He actually tweeted out this afternoon, I guess it was this afternoon their time. Gary, if you could put that up there. He did not waste any time at all as well, and he jumped all over this, as you might guess that he would. He writes, in light of the recent massive Russian air attacks on Ukraine, it's important to fully implement all the mentioned initiatives, the $6 billion ERA loan, that's from Europe, the qualitative military edge program, Ukraine's participation in a SAFE, and I'm actually not sure which that program is, the Readiness 2030 on an equal footing with all EU members, etc. As today's attack on Poland has shown, the future drone alliance could become a cornerstone of joint European air defense. It is crucial that it also include not only intelligence sharing, but also real mechanisms to neutralize Russian means of destruction in our common airspace. So he was jumping all over that issue right there, and he wants to, and he, of course, was thanking Ursula von der Leyen for her support there. Now, this comes on the heels just again yesterday, where Zelenskyy was again really pushing this issue of air defense missiles.
Ще з цього лютого росіяни відмовляються від всіх пропозицій припинення вогню. Тижнями Росія не може і не хоче сказати щось конкретне у відповідь Сполученим Штатам Америки про формат зустрічі лідерів. Росія вкладається у війну і тільки у війну. Сила потрібна у відповідь. Ми говоримо про посилення нашої ППО. Потрібні більш швидкі рішення по системах. Патріоти передусім.
So again, at least he's consistent. Zelenskyy has no intent, no possibility of seeking a negotiated outcome. Even though sometimes he uses those words, every one of his actions are clearly designed to say we don't want the war to end on terms that we don't like, that Russia would like. So what Vladimir Putin's been offering since June of last summer, what he has reiterated at Istanbul earlier this year, and what they have said point blank to President Trump just in the last few days, apparently, and may say again later this week as well, that the Russians want demilitarization, denazification, a territorial acquisition, and no NATO in Ukraine. Period. I mean, and they've never budged from that. So Ukraine doesn't want to do that. So they want a negotiated settlement that is fair and equitable, but they never put forth a definition of what that looks like. They just say they want that tag, that category of fair and equitable, which means we just don't like this one, but I'm not putting out anything else that's reasonable that says, all right, here's what we would agree to. I've never seen, except in the most vague forms, anything from the European or the Ukraine side that says this is what we can live with. If we can get a deal like this, we can live with. If there was something like that, then you could say, okay, there is a serious possibility of a discussion here. Russia is willing to negotiate. Maybe they're willing to give in on some issues here and there. But right now, the only plan on the table is the one from the Russian side. The Ukraine and European side will not put forward a position. So we don't know what they could live with because they've never said so. We do know what the Russians can live with because they have said so. But what we do know, what the Ukraine and the European side does say a lot, is I want more ammunition, I want more weapons, I want more training, I want more intelligence sharing, etc. And just more and more and more of the capabilities to fight. We want to expand this. Zelenskyy has just been monotonous, if not completely consistent, in trying always successfully, to one degree or another, to tie together everything that happens in Ukraine and making it everybody else's deal in the entire Western European countryside, or all of Europe, not just the Western Europe. He wants to say all of our security is tied together. And of course, it's being voiced by Donald Tusk, by Ursula von der Leyen, certainly Mark Rutte. And actually just before we came on the air here, this literally was just probably less than an hour old, we had the foreign minister for Poland, Sikorski, make the same connection.
When one or two drones does it, it is possible that it was a technical malfunction. But as I told you, in this case, there were 19 breaches. And it simply defies imagination that could be accidental. We have invoked Article 4. Take a look at precedents, at what happened when other allies did that. When Turkey did it, when she felt endangered by events in the air during the Syrian civil war, additional Patriot missiles were sent to Turkey. We need to create what Ursula von der Leyen called today in the European Parliament at her annual State of the Union address, a drone wall. This is a threat not only to Poland, this new technology of the mass use of drones is a threat to all of the EU and NATO, and we need to face it together.
So you see there, yes, we need to face this together. And you heard him again say that there were 19 drones. He addressed the possibility that apparently some in Belarus had said, some of the spokesman for Belarus said, well, maybe it's because of electronic warfare that the Ukraine side had used, which caused these to go off course. Because also understand, this came in the context of another multi-hundred drone and missile attack into Ukraine from the Russian side. So there were, I believe it was over 400 air vehicles this time. That's a combination of both drones of various types as well as cruise missiles, Caliber, Kinzhals, etc. Those things were coming in. So the claim was, well, maybe the electronic warfare, which they always try to do to try to knock these things off target, maybe that caused them to go into that there. So Sikorski is saying, okay, well, if it was a couple, maybe you could say that. But if it was 19, then you can't say that. So again, let's see the wreckage from 19 vehicles. That would help. Then we can exactly, with authority, say what they were, and then maybe they can figure out, exactly where they did come from. Maybe it was Russian, like they said. Maybe that's true. Maybe there were 19 of them. Maybe they really came from Russia. Let's find out. We do need that kind of evidence to validate what was said, because I'm sorry, but we can't take anybody at face value. Not the Russians, not the Ukrainians, not the Europeans, not the United States. Unfortunately, as you know, truth is the first casualty in any war. Deception is a normal part of warfare, as Sun Tzu talked about, and we demonstrate on a daily basis. So I'm sorry, you can't take anyone, and I mean anyone, at face value. You've got to have the evidence. You've got to see, so you have some idea of exactly what the truth is, because it's really difficult to get to, which is why we, even now, we're taking a wait and see attitude here. We only know what's in the immediate aftermath, what people are saying. We also want to see the evidence there. But there's not complete unanimity in Europe, as Ursula von der Leyen, Rutte, Tusk et al. Are saying, because there was even in these hours since, there has been a different interpretation among some about the lesson that needs to be learned here from this incident that has happened. I just showed you Foreign Minister Sikorski from Poland saying that. Well, turns out that Viktor Orban from Hungary this morning tweeted out on X, that says Hungary stands in full solidarity with Poland following the recent drone incident. The violation of Poland's territorial integrity is unacceptable. The incident proves, and this is where he differs, that our policy of calling for peace in the Russia-Ukraine war is reasonable and rational. Living in the shadow of a war is fraught with risks and dangers. It's time to make it stop. To this end, we support the efforts of President Donald Trump aimed at achieving peace. And that was almost immediately responded to by Sikorski, who says, no, Victor, the incident proves you should get off the fence and condemn Russian aggression. We ask you to unblock disbursement of EU funds for defense, approve tougher sanctions on the aggressor, and withdraw your veto on starting Ukraine's EU accessions and negotiations. So you see, both of them are taking an opportunity with what happened to say, hey, we're just going to reinforce our existing positions. Viktor Orban has said, I'm not going to participate in these sanctions against Russia because they're harmful to our country. And that's not anything we're going to do. We don't want to do things that are going to make war more likely. We want to do things that are going to make the end of the war more likely. And one of the things that's just a real pet peeve of Orban's is trying to fast track Ukraine into the European Union, because that's, at least allegedly, it's an economic issue right now. And to fast track Ukraine with their horrendous economic condition and status, and their legendary corruption that they have, he says that's the last thing we need to do, is bring that kind of stuff into the EU as well, because that puts everybody on the hook for that. So he's opposed to a fast track. He said, do a normal track. And he said, and that means they have to meet all the gates like every single other member ever did. And there's no reason to fast track that. It's not like that's going to change the outcome of the war, because then you have to say, hang on, is the EU a war-making facility or organization, or is that the NATO role? Because it sounds like you're trying to make somehow the war effort help the Ukrainian side by getting in, fast-tracking into the EU, like that's going to have some positive war effect on it. Because if it's not going to have a positive war effect, or if that's not even on the table, then one would say, why would you even want to fast-track that? Because you're all going to be saddled by the results. So that's not good, really. That's not even good for Poland. But yet, that's what so many of the leaders are really, really pushing for. And so far, Orban has said, no, we're not going to do that. And he's saying he wants to, join with Trump and saying, let's get the war over with. But Sikorski is not he's using the same exact event to say, no, you need to get off the fence. You need to start doing this. And see, the problem, I get Sikorski's motivation. I'll just say that. They're on the border with Russia. You see, whether accidental or intentional, these drones do pose a threat to Ukraine. The whole issue of war, if anybody's going to get hit, if there's ever Russia and NATO war, I guarantee you the first target is going to be Poland. So they do have a lot at stake. So that's legitimate. And it's valid that they have a lot of these concerns. But then you have to say, what is going to best provide for the security for Poland? Is it to press for more sanctions? Is it to press to harm Russia more? Or is it to press to get the damn war over with so that you get the risk of accidental war or accidental expansion or just stupid decisions made by somebody, miscalculation, etc.? That's not good for Poland. And what Sikorsky is suggesting there has proven itself an abysmal, catastrophic failure. The specific issue of the sanctions. We beat this dead horse, but since he brought it back to life, I guess we got to beat it to death again. You have absolutely failed since 2022. You keep saying that you're going to have all these sanctions that are going to cripple the Russian economy, and you've never done it. You have now made Russia almost you no longer can use Western sources to punish Russia that's going to make their economy collapse, like Scott Bessent ridiculously said a few days ago. That's not going to happen, and there's physical evidence to validate that. And there is no logical, rational path with the sanctions they're proposing that you can draw the line back and say, well, this could cause a collapse in the Russian economy because X, Y, and Z. You have to be able to do that. You can't just use this category of sanctions, just throw that on the table and do it. If you can't directly tie, and I mean directly tie the imposition of these sanctions and show a logical, rational way how that would then seep into the Russian economy, knock out the pillars, drop the thing down, and even that's not enough. Then you have to say how the collapse of those pillars, should you be able to accomplish them, would then cause the Russian war machine to stop. And there is no such analysis. And if you did one, I think you'd pretty quickly discover that, like has been in the history of warfare, you can certainly go back and look at the Germans in World War II, even though they had massive attacks from both the East and the West, from the Soviet Union and from the Allies on our side, were just scorching the German war economy as best we could, and we never brought them to their knees. Even if you hit a few of those pillars out, they always found another way. And Russia considers this an existential fight, i.e., they will suffer whatever is necessary and they will pay whatever price is necessary to ensure their security. And the more you push like that, and if you start harming them, you're probably going to get a redoubling of their efforts because they simply cannot and will not submit to, okay, well, you hurt us, so now we're going to live with an emboldened and a strengthened NATO alliance on their shore. They'll never do that on their borders. They're certainly never going to do that, and there's so much evidence to validate that. So the very thing that you see von der Leyen, Rutte, Tusk, and Sikorsky, all the things that they're trying to compel compliance from Hungary, from Slovakia, from Trump even, are virtually guaranteed to fail. I'll say virtually. Human affairs, there's always the opportunity some weird thing can happen. But you are it's like saying, okay, well, I'm going to go to Vegas and I'm going to play the roulette wheel. And I'm going to put all my money on one number here. I've never been to Vegas. I've never been into these roulette table. I have no idea. But it's theoretically possible. I could get lucky and put that number on there and just bankroll and just become rich. The likelihood, though, is that it's not going to fall on that one piece there, and I'm going to lose everything. So, yeah, it's theoretically possible that this could succeed, but the overwhelming probability in human affairs and validated fundamentals show that pursuing that policy is almost certain to fail and could just catastrophically harm our own interests. But that's where we are, and that's just kind of how things happen right now. Okay, well, I've shown you some of the view from Ukraine and from Poland itself. Let's see what the Russians are saying about this. Russians are saying, and kind of a curiously titled thing. Now, I don't know if this is just a product of the translation because this is from Google Translate, but the Russian side has said that we did not. Gary, if you could put that full screen up there, not that one, the other one, the previous one, that one. They said the targets for destruction on Polish territory were not planned. And they continued to repeat that. That was some of the other people were saying that. The Dmitry Peskov said the same kind of thing. They're saying we did not have any targets designed to destroy anything in Poland. Now, you could say, well, maybe that means that, like the picture there was an unarmed drone and one that didn't have an explosive device. Maybe they intended that to go in there. leaves a little room for that. But the one thing Peskov did say was, hey, we're more than happy to discuss. We'll have conversations. So yeah, we don't have any problem doing that. Let us see the evidence. He also asked for the same thing. He said, let's see the evidence of the drones you're talking about, and then let's figure it out. So that's what the Russians have said there. But not all the Russians are in an apologetic mood. And this one from RIA Novosti says the drones over Poland. Russia has valuable advice for Warsaw. And the author of this writes, Poland is the main NATO military logistics hub in a war against Russia, including the ongoing Ukrainian conflict. And no refusal of Warsaw to participate with its army directly in hostilities will change this. So if something happens, objects on Polish territory will not just be legitimate, but direct priority target for the Russian army. And that's one of the things I was mentioning a minute ago, was when you just look at the map, you see the proximity there. Poland would be the first target in line, probably a much bigger military priority for Russia. Definitely, even though the Baltics are closer, that would be, without question, would be the number one priority target, because the other ones that are closer, Hungary and Romania, and they pose much, much lower and maybe even no military threat to Russia. But Poland does. Because they're so aggressive at being part of this, as you know, and that's where majority of all of the support from the West and the United States comes in through Poland, and then is transited into Ukraine from that. So Poland has had the biggest role in the war so far in terms of any NATO country. So if there is any kind of an accident, miscalculation, and the war expands and there is conflict between Russia and NATO, I can assure you, just from a military perspective, Poland will be the priority target for Russia. And, you're talking, now they've got this huge industrial capacity, and there was a German report I saw this morning that they said that Russia is now either close to or soon will be able to produce. Yeah, thanks for that, Gary. We'll soon be able to produce 2,000 Shahed drones per day at that rate. And we've seen that they've gotten up to 800 used per day. So they could dramatically accelerate that. And they're not using that many. So even last night's was around 400. The one before that was 800. But if they're producing anywhere close to that figure, say 1,700 per day, that means that their stockpiles are just going through the roof. So in the event that there is a conflict, Russia has a massive stockpile of these strategic drones, these operational distance drones that they have. So they could absolutely saturate anyone's air defenses for a considerable range. And certainly Poland is well within those ranges. So that's something that we should pay a little bit more attention to. Let's now take a look at then what did happen and what does all this mean? What is the likelihood? And so Poland said that there were 19 air targets. And they have specifically said Shaheds. We haven't seen any of the evidence yet. Maybe there are. Ursula von der Leyen said there were 10 Shaheds. Maybe she just meant 10 out of the 19. Maybe there were only 10. It's really unclear because there's different messages coming out from different parties in the West. But again, we really need some photographic evidence. Russia did launch, and again, this is important to note, they did launch another 400 drone strike into Ukraine. And actually, there was quite a bit. They had over 40 cruise missiles were part of this one, too. The last few have been really heavy in the drones and lighter on the cruise missiles. This one overnight had quite a bit more. Ukraine allegedly shot down a considerable majority of them, but because the numbers are high, still a lot is getting through. And every night, more and more targets are getting hit in Ukraine, their energy infrastructure, electricity producing facilities, factories, which apparently was the overnight primary target, military factories of drones, mechanical production, technology. They keep taking that off. There was a big American-owned technology firm that was hit a night or two ago. And all kinds of tactical attacks like that keep going on through there. You just can't keep having that kind of barrage go through, and it's not going to cause eventually some pretty significant damage inside Ukraine. But to their credit, they have been able to endure with all of these long-range strikes, and they have not buckled yet. And it probably is having some impact on the front line, but the primary issue on the front line is still the manpower issue. So what are the options of what happened here? So option one is that the drones were intentionally launched from Russia and that they wanted to send a signal of some sort. They clearly did not want to expand the war, and they did not want to attack Poland because, at least what's been reported so far, there were no armed drones that went in there. There were no attacks. None of the drones hit a building or anything else that hit their targets. It seems really unlikely that Russia would just say, all right, I'm going to send some actual regular Garans in to blow up something in Poland, because then that is completely against Russian national interest. The last thing Russia wants is to have NATO come in the war against Ukraine. In fact, Russia has done a lot to make sure that that doesn't happen. I mean, just rationally speaking, if you're in a position now to where you feel like, okay, we're already past a position where the outcome is determined, we are going to win. It's a matter of how much firepower we can bring on there and keep our casualties to some kind of acceptable level, and then just over time, just ground the other side to dust. They clearly are in that position right now. So in that position, the absolute last thing that you would even want to do is say, all right, I'm going to now do something intentionally that's going to draw the other side in there and now maybe bring more opponents into the war against us, because now then that would completely upset everything, and you would no longer be in this safe position. You may have a huge expansion of the war. Russia wouldn't want to do that. So that seems the most unlikely clause, that Russia wouldn't want it to attack into Poland. Now, there is some possibility that they wanted to send some kind of a message. I've seen some people speculate on that possibility as well. But I don't know what message you would send that you would intentionally fire that many drones into. The one that has some plausibility is that Russia wanted to test Polish air defenses. They wanted to see how they would respond. They wanted to see where they would respond from, because certainly Russia can track all of that. So all of these, I think there was some F-16s, some F-35s that were used in this, some tankers, et cetera. I feel very confident that Russia's satellite capabilities and their tracking, they probably know where every one of those came up, just like our side knows where all the Russian missiles and drones came from. And you've seen that graphic we show periodically where it shows the tracks of the missiles. I'm sure that those are even open source stuff. So I'm sure that Russia's able to do the same. That's plausible. And so maybe they wanted to send some unarmed drones without the intent to blow up anything, but because they wanted to test. Can't discount that possibility. That's a legitimate one. One of the others is that the drones veered off course. I kind of tend to agree with Sikorsky on this. If it was a couple of them, then maybe you could say that. But if 19 is the genuine number, then it seems a little bit less likely that those were accidental. That I agree with, and the likelihood is that that was intentional from somewhere. Some sources are already claiming that these drones came from Belarus, not even from Russia proper. We'll see where that where the information leads to that too. Third opportunity is that we have to examine this as well. False flag. There have been some unsubstantiated, that I've not seen any substantiation claims already from some Russian sources, which said these came from Ukraine. Now, there certainly is motivation for this. And anytime whether you're talking about a crime or any kind of an action in wartime, you got to look and see who benefits, who's got something to gain. What are their motivations? So as we see, there are some potential motivations on either side. From the Russians I just mentioned, maybe they did want to test out the Polish air defenses. So in case the war does expand, they have some more knowledgeable about potential enemy capabilities there. That's a possibility. But then there's an equal possibility on the other side of that calculation that either the Europeans themselves or Zelenskyy had a motivation to make it look like the Russians were attacking. And so they launched these drones in, and then just claimed so far without any physical evidence being provided that it came from Russia. And of course, as all these sound bites and clips I've shown you already by the European leaders and by Zelenskyy himself show that they immediately jumped on this incident and used it to justify existing policies that they had. More sanctions on Russia. Got to push more sanctions on Russia. More air defense missiles for Ukraine. More anti-drone capabilities. Rearming, rebuilding, etc. All the themes that have been going on before, they all get supercharged in this. Now, if that was the case, I'm not sure that this is going to have a lot of utility. In fact, I don't see how any of this is going to have a lot of utility for either side, because nothing was blown up. Even according to Tusk there, he said, there was no casualties. Nothing was damaged. I think I did see one thing where a building was damaged, but that could have been from the debris that fell after one of the air drones were shot down. But so far, no casualties have been reported. So this is not going to have a lot of legs, because I'm sure that tonight there's going to be another round of drones coming in from Russia. There'll be other things happening on the front line. There's, all things, whether you're talking about Kupiansk, Liman area, Pokrovsk, or down in Zaporizhia area, the front line keeps going on every day. I mean, that keeps happening. The Ukraine soldiers keep losing troops every day. The risk to a breakthrough is ever present. And so the war's just going to keep going. So it's not going to be a lot of benefit. If it was a false flag, it was frankly kind of a weak one, because it's not going to change anybody. You've already had these arguments. You already want all these things, and you'll keep wanting them. And then this is going to play out. So it's not really going to have any effect. The bottom line is, though, the longer this war goes on, the more there is concern that whether it was a false flag or whether it was a Russian intention, there's the risk that one of these drones strikes and kills somebody, and it hits maybe even a military target. And then instead of Article 4, which was imposed here, by the way, if you're not familiar, Article 4 is that, let's see, I might possibly have that one up handy. Let me look real quick just so you can see what Article 4 is about, and I don't have it handy, as it turns out. Sorry about that. But basically, it's a level below Article 5. Article 5 is when one country has been attacked. Article 4 is when something happens puts a question the territorial integrity of a member, and then they can consult with one another. So it's one step below. It's not a war footing, but it's pretty close to it. So the fact that Article 4 has been officially invoked by Poland should get everybody's attention, because I just promise you, war would be a catastrophic outcome for everybody, for Russia, for Poland, for the United States, Germany, UK, etc. All these people who have some kind of fantasies that somehow we could win a war with Russia are just absurd and foolish to the highest degree. Everyone would lose. There is nothing to gain. We would never gain anything. Listen to this carefully. Even if you want to theoretically say somehow, if God forbid this should go nuclear, then all bets are off the table. But if somehow you could keep this on a conventional level, and theoretically, in some number of years, you could somehow defeat Russia, that would be catastrophic loss and failure for our side, because the cost would be astronomically high to achieve that Pyrrhic victory, because your cities would be in rubble. Look at Ukraine. It would be bigger than that, because the stakes would be higher. So too would the level of damage and destruction. And of course, the likelihood of it going nuclear is really high. And even in the theoretical possibility of a victory conventionally for us on the other side, compared to what we have right now, would just be a unbelievable disaster of the highest order. And now it's not, you're trying to figure out where to find billions of dollars to rebuild Ukraine, what's already been destroyed so far. Now that it would be in the trillions, and where's that money going to come from? Anywhere, because everybody's going to have the same issues. And there's just not that much money to go around. It's going to obviously just gut everybody's economy. And so there's not going to be money. And just so you're talking about probably decades of turning into a pauper what is right now a modern European state and a modern European continent. So the cost need to be examined here. Even the cost of so-called success. There is nothing to gain here and everything in the world to lose. We need to be paying a lot more attention to the what next. It's one thing I harp on all the time here, which too few, and it looks like apparently that includes the NATO Secretary General or the Foreign Minister for Poland or their president, certainly Zelenskyy. Nobody wants to look at the what next and then what. So if you take action.
Hey, Danny, here's NATO's Article 4 in text.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that's pretty much what I said a second ago. So you see it written out there if you want to read the details. But the bottom line is that we need to be very, very careful about what happens next and what we do with whatever has happened here. We need to find out. We need to do an investigation and analysis. We need to produce the evidence of what happened. Look at these drones. If it came from Russia, we need to figure that out. Then we need to increase our consultations to make sure this doesn't go any further than it is right now. That's what we got for you. We'll continue to follow this, of course, and bring you any updates we have. We do have another show this afternoon. We have the ever popular Larry Johnson at 1 o'clock this afternoon. I'm sure we'll have some updates on some of the things here. And then we're also going to take a look at some other aspects of other events that are going on in the world. Don't want to miss Larry. He's always got some great ideas to pass along. Thanks very much, folks. And we'll see you this afternoon on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.